Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 370 of Humanity Rising on this beautiful winter day as we commence the month of December. And it's springtime in the South. We're getting close to that part of the year where many of us go into hibernation and family time and soul searching. And it's in that spirit that we want to dedicate the next 3 sessions on Humanity Rising to a very deep contemplation, I would say a existential contemplation of some of the deep issues that we humans need to ponder at this very crucial moment in human history, when civilization is at stake, potentially even our existence as a species is at stake. And one of the questions is, as you look at human history and you look at human civilization, you look at governance, you look at society generally, there's an extraordinary paradox. At an individual level, we show great genius and precociousness, and we are capable of producing masterpieces and all kinds of illuminations of the human soul that are inspiring for people over generations. Just think of all the geniuses that have graced humanity. And yet when we come together as a group, it seems like the collective intelligence goes down. And we encumber ourselves with all kinds of strictures that preclude and actually inhibit the very genius that we're individually and even collectively capable of. So we're going to look at that issue today, the relationship between individual brilliance and collective mediocrity. And that, I think, is a very important question for us to ponder, because we see solutions all around, but an inability at a collective level to embrace the obvious. Why is that? Why is that? So that's our question for today, as we begin a 3-day program on intentional change. Before we jump into the program, let us pause as we always do and just take a moment, wherever you are, however you're feeling, just to sit back just for a minute and center yourself in your body. Take a breath. Attune yourself with your heart for just the next minute, minute and a half. Listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and deep thanksgiving that you're here today. You can be part of this conversation about who we are and how we prepare ourselves for the future at this extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. Now, with a heart full of gratitude and deep appreciation and love for each and every one of you joining our program today, I want to begin just by expressing my deep thanks and appreciation and gratitude to a group of people who've been populating and supporting our after chat groups. Stanley Pokris, Shannon, others, Kurt Kruger, who you'll hear in a few minutes, who've really been nurtured by Humanity Rising and nurture Humanity Rising. Kurt was also involved in the Peace Action Lab that has been bringing in the thread of peace activism over the 18 months of Humanity Rising. And this next 3 days is really being convened by people who care very deeply about what we're trying to do here in Humanity Rising, as really a light, a flame into the world of solutions and inspiration and alignment with the natural ecosystems, dedicated to how do we at this crucial moment understand the intractable issues that plague us, but are capable in this moment of inspiring a vision of future possibility and implementing a pathway so that we become worthy at this moment in our collective journey of constructing a world that will honor our children under the 7th generation. So I just feel just deep gratitude for all that this group of people have done over the months of Humanity Rising in the after chat in the Peace Action Lab, and the caring that they've manifested day by day, week by week, month by month. This is what makes the world go round in the end. So thank you, all of you. Now I'd great pleasure to introduce Joy Gilfilen and Kurt Kruger and Ian Lewis. Joy is the convener of the next 3 days. You've seen her on Humanity Rising before. She's an activist in the Northwest part of the United States. She has a podcast called Joy Talk. She's really inspired people with her creative civic engagement and social activism as a coach, as an author, and principally as an activist for goodness in the world, but is also a very deep thinker. And is going to preside over the next 3 days with a variety of people that she's assembled. So Joy, thank you for coming back onto Humanity Rising. Very grateful for everything that you've done to help support and nurture our very audacious endeavor to enable humanity at this moment to rise. So thank you and welcome.
You are very welcome, Jim. There is nothing I would prefer to be doing right at the moment. I mean, this is like a dream come true to be able to make a difference in the world, because it's been on my heart since I was a little kid that we were destroying the earth and we didn't have to do it. So that's been my work for a long time. And I've been doing all these sciences and studies and deep research, but there was no place to bring the information. So Jim, it is so incredible what you have been doing for the last 375 days or 450, whatever. It's like you have been doing so much work to bring so many profound people together. And the work in the Chat Action Network is amazing, because what that allows is all these people who are sitting here listening and getting full to the brim of knowledge. What do we do with the knowledge? And that's why I'm here now. I met Kurt, I met Stan, I met Ian, I met these people inside that chat room. And we found that we had a common language, or not a common language, but a common purpose. And that's the point of these next 3 days, intentional change. These are the philosophies that I've developed myself, but these guys are doing it. I mean, they're doing it in their world, and they've been doing it for decades, actually, not to date you guys, but Kurt Kruger, you're going to hear from today, and you're going to hear from Ian Lewis, two amazing human beings who have, it has been such a pleasure to meet. So do you want to start, Kurt, and just introduce yourself in just a few minutes, and then we'll move to Ian, and then I will start the first segment.
I want to welcome everybody with great respect and love, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm thankful for being able to be, having been a teacher since 1969 in the barrios of Los Angeles, in the what people would say the ghettos of Los Angeles, and to be able to teach all over the world also. And it's been an incredible evolution. And I'm just another you. If I can do it, what can't you do? So this is what we're here about. You'll hear about certain things. And Ian, talk about somebody doing things. He's my mentor. I get to use him as a guide for where we're all going, because we're all evolving so greatly when we take that little bit or a lot of action. Thank you. Ian.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Jim. I enter this discussion with such humility. I'm talking to the world. I guess I've done it before. I've spent a life in my home of South England, helping people to live and thrive in the outdoors. I formed Life College in '89, and we set up a satellite broadcast. Most people wouldn't know what one of those is, but in those days you squirted the bird and lo and behold, we hit 60 countries that got in touch. And we went from there to strength, working with values and ethics with the United Nations and UNESCO. So having written Living Values and Right Living and Further Reaches of Human Nature, both on Life College website, I realized that deep intention was the place that I came from. And it is where this world thrives. If it's not present, it's definitely not thriving. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about deep intention and to help work with the learning and practical application of deep intention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Kurt. And it is my absolute pleasure to share with you all some of the formulas that we're going to be talking about in revealing humanity's deep cellular betrayal. And I want to speak to specifically what that is. When we do not honor nature, we betray ourselves because we are nature. And it's something that I experienced when I was a little girl. And I was on the farm, and I could not figure out why humans were so busy trying to kill the world and kill each other when, on the farm and with all my neighbors and friends, our job was trying to figure out how in the world to get through every season, get the hay in, feed the cows, make sure nothing died. There was this juxtaposition, and I couldn't figure out the problem. And so I've been working on that for about 60 years. And so we're going to jump right into Intentional Change Series 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to share my screen because I want to introduce the series as 3 parts. Is that working? Okay, so the Intentional Change Series 1, 2, and 3, this is December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, interestingly enough. So December 1st, we're introducing, Kurt and Ian and I are introducing Revealing Humanity's Deep Cellular Betrayal. And the reason we have these 2 different humans here is because they are radically different in how they came to understand the power of intention. One is Eastern Hemisphere born and raised. One is Western Hemisphere. I think you're born and raised in the Western Hemisphere, Kurt. Most of your life has been here. And then they've transited the entire planet, the entire globe, doing their work, learning and becoming better, wise men who are leaders in this world for intentional change. And they've taken on the tasks of doing mentorship and leadership of youth, and their work is extraordinary. On December 2nd, Juggling History, Language, and Experience, we're bringing forward Paul McGeed. He is an amazing human being. You'll hear more about him, but as a juggler, as a theater and performing artist, and as a deep dive researcher into 48,000 years of history that digs into the cultural heritage. He's Jewish by ethnicity. He's worked deeply in the heart of many indigenous cultures around the world, and he's performed on Broadway. And that's quite a mix of a human. And I'm really looking forward to having him on the call tomorrow. He's going to be talking about the doctrine of discoveries, but deeper than that, how is it that we create words and myths and stories and then become beholden to them with laws and rules and regulations and authorities and punishment and prison. So we're going to run the gamut of conversation tomorrow. And then on December 3rd is the conversation, Creating Powerful Synergy Towards Energetic Revitalization. And in this conversation, Ian and I are going to come back together, and we're going to talk about the challenge that we have with bringing life back to our oceans, to our world, and what are we doing, and how can we use the knowledge of intentional change as collective individuals. Each one of us is diverse, we're very different, but we're going to talk about how do we put it to work to truly make change in the world now. We don't have time to be horsing around thinking we got to learn a bunch of stuff. We got to get to work. So let's put our hearts to work. Let's start now. So what I don't understand is why my, there. The richness of humanity is that we're living beings. And it took a long time for science to catch up to the knowledge that we all knew when we were little children. We know that the world works. I don't know anybody who hasn't sat around speculated, why are we here and what's the universe doing and how come the universe is out there and I'm just a bug on this, this thing. But science, quantum physics, neurobiology, astrophysics, astronomy, and then deep internal work from the shaman work to all of these other different kinds of people who do spiritual innovation and work inside themselves have collectively come to understand in this now, the 21st century, specifically this year in 2021, there have been so many things that came in the aftermath of 2020 when we were all separated. In 2021, I feel the energy as we're starting to notice that, you know what, we matter. We matter to the universe, we matter to ourselves, we matter everywhere. And Kala did a presentation just a couple of days ago that was most extraordinary in being able to show pictures of this. So I recommend you go back and watch that. So why, if we're so brilliant and we have this capacity to change the world, why do we screw it all up? I mean, what's the deal about that? How is it that we end up destroying our environment, destroying species? We're eradicating species. Why are we incarcerating so many people? Why are we creating war after war after war after war? Why do we do it? I mean, we know better than this. So if we're so magnificent, why do we underperform? That was one of my very first questions that I asked myself. And I realized that, we live in an evolving, changing world, and people get afraid of change because we've been told to be afraid of change. You know what? Change is normal. Change is average. Your body is changing every single minute of every single day in every single second. And your body, the food you're putting in today is going through your system and it's processing and it's coming out the other end, either into the toilet. And I'm being brutal, but I mean, this is reality. It either goes back into the toilet and into the earth or into septic systems or wherever it goes. And the rest of us gets burned up as fuel, and it becomes our eyeballs, it becomes our hair follicles. We are living beings, and we are processing life all the time. So to pretend that we are fixed and we are contained and our body is just this is simply a mistake. And the fact of the matter is we're a living organism. When I was in the Amazon jungle, actually, when I had this awakening, and I went, you know what? My body started as 2 cells. Think about that. You're 47 trillion cells now. But when my body started, my parents were 47 trillion cells roughly each, but they were 2 cells each originally. And before that, we had 8 cells from our grandparents. 16 cells from their parents. And if you add it up going back 10 generations, my current body, my biology, my DNA, what makes me tick, has lived in 4,128 bodies. That's extraordinary. You know, if we take a generation of 20 years, that's just in a few hundred years, we've been alive in an enormous amount of bodies. And here's what modern science and research has also shown is that we carry our emotional intelligence forward. We may not carry all the details of the lives we've lived, but we carry our emotional intelligence forward. And so to navigate life, we already have an emotionally smart, intelligent, instinctive guidance system that helps us grow, feel, sense, live in the current world. And to pretend that we're disconnected and we are not that is one of the greatest betrayals there is. So as I did my research, I came along and I thought, how in the world can I explain to my sons, to my family, if the world worked well, how would it work and what is its natural process? It naturally goes from birth through growth. We prune ourselves naturally, and then we eventually die, or parts of us die all the time, and we recycle and we eat new carrots and eat new food. And those carrots and that food, guess what it had? It little enzymes, little particulate thingies, and it goes out into the soil and it eats the soil up and it turns it into a carrot. Then I eat the carrot and it turns into a body. And then I get, I think, smarter, I get good eyesight or whatever they taught me. But the point is, there's a pattern. When we are first born, we see, first, when we're in the uterus, just to be clear, when we were in the uterus, we were not even visually seeable. We were just energy and matter. We had a desire, we had an intention to live, and we had an intention to explore life and become another being. Okay. It took us 9 months to get ourselves organized so we could become a body and get, booted out into the world. And then it takes time to grow. And so the cycle is, when we're born, we see, we talk, we crawl. As our body gets organized, we learn to stand up, we walk, we fight or assess things, we challenge things, and then we think about it. And then we figure out that if we just get a little bit smart and we're quiet, we can run into the next room and we're going to learn more. And so that pattern of see, talk, crawl, stand, walk, fight, think, adjust, and run, that thing, amazingly enough, becomes like rings on a tree, and it processes, and we learn that pattern of learning. So it's natural. That's the cool thing, is that it's natural for us to learn how to live in the world around us. And so we follow leaders, and as part of the human world and the living world of nature, we are energy in motion, emotions. And with this repeating cycle of learning, it works like rings on a tree. We go in cycles and waves and spirals. We learn to intake and release, inhale and exhale in tandem with our impulses. We learn with an innate instinct to guide our soul's desire and to consume and give back. And we naturally follow our leaders. Whoever went before is the persons and the things who provided food, nurturance, protection. It's easy to follow leaders. We're not bad because we followed leaders. We're actually good because we follow our leaders. We're learning organisms. So what if our leaders are off course? Well, we follow them off course. And one of the patterns that we have, when I was working with my teenagers and I was watching what was happening after the turn of the century in 2004 and 5 and 7, I realized that our world was working at an extremely high rate of speed. Technology had hit us hard. The world had just shifted into a totally different gear. My business had moved from I used to have an 80% close rate on everything I did for 40 years because I never sold anybody anything unless I educated them first and I knew they needed it. And then they just said yes, because it was a smart thing to do. Well, suddenly in 2003, my business flipped upside down and I couldn't close. I was at a 20% close rate. And I was at a 20% retention rate. And I looked around the world and I went, what in the world happened? And I've got another chart that I don't have in here, but it's a chart that shows the seismic shifts that we experienced in the marketplace in that 1998 to 2003 period. And my sons were experiencing the aftermath of it, and the trauma and the fear that had suddenly hit our marketplace across the middle class and the younger class. The boys were dealing on the basketball team, they were dealing with trauma everywhere, and the hopefulness for the future had gone in the tank. They were listening to all kinds of rap music and problems, and this fear model was driving the addiction society for their parents, their kids, everybody else. So at one point I sat back and I said, what am I going to teach my kids? I'm supposed to be one of the best coaches in my field, and what I'm teaching isn't working anymore. It doesn't matter if I get the white picket fence and $3 million in the bank. What matters is that my kids survive into the next generation, and that we take care of our earth and they have food to eat and a world to live in that's worth it. So I built this model to help my son and all of his buddies navigate through emotional trauma, because change was not going to go backwards. It was going to accelerate even faster. Information was kicking in. Our world was getting smaller. Everything was changing. So I started working with this, and I realized that I actually asked my son, I said, what am I supposed to do? I'm one of the smartest people I know, of course, and you're my son. I've been coaching you, and you guys are going off course. And what do I need to know? And he said, stop yammering, Mom. He said, draw me a picture. Us kids, we need a picture. We need one thing to do. I work in construction. I need one thing to do when I'm in tension or stress. Tell me how to get out of the mess and make a good decision. I said, okay. Took me 30 days, and I drew this diagram because this has like 17, I don't know, it's got a whole pile of different philosophies in it. But the bottom line is, when you're in a pickle, breathe, stop, look around, and figure out how are you going to get out. It doesn't matter that you're in it. You're already in it. There's no point in going back into history and worrying with who's going to save your life or who's going to, who's doing what. The thing that's critical is that you move into the builder, leader, innovator mindset. So I built this model. I started coaching the boys. I got most of them through high school and into college without losing. I think I lost one kid to a murder. But out of all the kids that we were coaching at our high school, the kids made it. And I was incredibly, incredibly happy. Not that everything had to do with me, but this tool was very helpful. So as I got involved in civics and I started looking at the mass incarceration issue, and I started looking at why are we consistently creating trauma and destroying ourselves as a species, I created this, there's this conditioning triangle that came from that prior chart. I used the Cartman drama triangle back there to understand the persecutor, rescuer, victim model. And I went, as a society, the thing that changed the world so dramatically at the turn of the century for me and in small business and in my community, and put people into terror and addiction and crazy behavior, we're creating a persecutor, victim, rescuer business system. We've created abusers and predators in our business and government and institutional systems. We've created victims who become schemers and manipulators, and they prey on others. Then we created systems that are rescuer-based, savior-based, enabler, or they're the parasite. Oh, ain't it awful? I can stay here and just, if I do the right thing, maybe we'll get out, or I'll go rescue her and tell you how to do it right. So this pattern of decomposition is happening. To flip it over, I built the model to be a builder, a leader, and an innovator. And you're going to hear more about that from Kurt and Ian in a few minutes. The key thing that I want to leave from my research into incarceration, and I ended up running for sheriff to figure out what in the world was actually the biggest issue, because I couldn't figure out why our community has voted against 2 jails, massive jail taxes, and yet the sheriff was still spouting that we needed it and he was going to get it, and he was still going after it. So I ran for sheriff against him just to understand what's in his mind that he thinks it's right to do that, instead of heal the people, heal the trauma, invest in prevention, empower people. Why is he still going after that? And what I found is that we have an entire system actually in America. I don't know about the rest of the world. I know about America, that the cost of education is minimal, and yet we will do, the cost of incarceration is extraordinary, but we will spend more money. In California, in the year that I was doing some of this research, they built 1 school and 22 prisons. And I went, why are we investing in taking away freedom in America We're number one at taking away freedom when we sell freedom as the opportunity. Something's wrong with that. So I started building systems. And this is the one of the most valuable lessons that I built. This is the formula. In the intentional change model, what I learned is that I create this tic-tac-toe thing from the spiral diagram. I create this linear tic-tac-toe because people like to think in left to right. So I've got a physical line, I've got a mental line, and I've got a spiritual line, the body, the mind, and the spirit. And I think, okay, if we're moving from the past into the future, the past, let's write down the things, any pickle that I'm in. I'll use it as a blank diagram and I just write what's here. What are the resources I have to work with in the middle? And what are the trends that indicate to me that there are people working on solutions? Because the fact is, most people are working on solutions. So that's that model. And the Fibonacci spiral is real. That model ties right into the Fibonacci, ties right back into the earth and how we work in the world around us. And then I realized something pretty cool. There's exponential power. And I learned this from some of you folks who have been on this call and people from around the intention, the power of intention. If you can take my individual body, mind, spirit, mix it with my relationship with a couple of these guys on here, we can go from the me to the we all. That takes us from the individual to the community to the planetary impact. And if you can get that, that's the same 3x3 matrix that I just drew for you in the intentional change model. It's the same diagram. We can take the balance of my trinity, my body, mind, spirit, align it with vibrational integrity, which is what we're all talking about, put it into unified motion with deliberate intention to heal and bring vital life to the planet. We can create exponential transformation. And if we do that in teams and entire networks, I mean, you got to run the numbers. I don't even know how to do it. But the exponential power of mixing us together across the continent and then working with love and creative courage and joy to create the best world possible, we can, in fact, change this world and do it very fast. And I've proven it to myself, whether or not all you guys believe it yet, I know it's possible. And this is the model we use. We look from the past, we take our values, then we move into the future, put your passion into the future, visualize it, work on it, do it with intention, and then step backwards and say, if it was already done, how would it have gotten done? This is a great tool for being able to manage our future think, to go to work. And with that, I just want to close my section by saying I am at joygilfilen.com. I'm developing a Civic Joy Academy to teach these philosophies and these models online so that people can learn them all over the world. And that's my curriculum of courses. I will be on Patreon. But these are the models. It's the science of intentional bioenergetics. We are living energy and we work biophysiologically, emotionally. We have intentional change models. I've got a biology of influence and the way to manage and navigate through the fear and joy traps. And then I've been able to apply it to the physics of civics and troubleshooting so we can look at systems and then intentional change tools. So with that, I'm going to introduce Kurt Kruger. And I look forward to, you guys should look forward actually to the stories that he's going to tell you, because he is an amazing human being who has learned so much over the last decades that you've been on this planet. Go for it, Kurt.
Oh, well, thank you very much for setting up this stage, because, I mean, you have all these models, and so many of us didn't have any models to follow or anything. And your gift in giving that model, and it's fabulous. I mean, Bucky Fuller had his famous saying about models and everything. I got to be able to be a teacher in 1969, and I got into one of the worst schools in America. It had the two biggest Black gangs and the two biggest Latino gangs in the country. And I got to teach in a bungalow. Imagine a bungalow, self-contained, but it was surrounded by the football field and basketball courts, separated from the main campus. by the shop building and the gym. That was a canyon in between. It was called the canyon because there was selling drugs, there was fighting, there was making out, there was all kinds of things happening before people got to come to learn history or social studies. Thank God I was teaching world history to 7th graders. Actually, this was an 8th grade class. And I got to be able to teach them, but how am I going to teach people after coming into all this mess? And I had learned meditation from a guy named Swami Muktananda. He was a master of meditation. Got me into meditation like that. It was amazing. So I thought, hey, I'm going to apply this because when we get something good, we want to share it. And at the very start of the year, I had my students put down their books open to the page we're going to deal with, put their homework on the edge of the table, and sit up straight and close their mouth and eyes. Just pay attention to the movement and sound of your breath. That's all I said. I said, this is going to calm you down. I'm going to collect the homework during that time. I'm taking roll during that time. And they're just sitting peacefully. They're becoming present in my classroom. Well, I was a very intense student of Muktananda, and he had given me a mantra, and he told me why it worked. So I told these students after about 2 weeks of paying attention to the movement and sound of the breath to repeat mentally, because when you repeat something mentally over and over and over again, it concentrates the mind to that one chosen thought. And millions of people have used it for thousands of years. And so it was like a cosmic tuning fork. And I sort of described it that way, and even more down to earth for these students. And this boy in the back of the class, he was about 6'5" and about 250 pounds. He says, Om Namah Hu, I ain't going to do that shit. Excuse me, that's what he said. And I said, John, I don't know if you are going to be doing it or not. What I do know is that you're sitting up straight, your mouth and eyes are closed, and that's all I know. But when you do it, you will get the benefit of it. Check it out if you want to. Try it. Then things got to be so good that their grades improved in all of their classes. I checked it because my wife at the time's mother was the counselor for my classes. And so she could tell the difference in all of the classes. Now, this wasn't a scientific research, but it was good enough for me because it's a natural research. Well, then I go off to India. And on my way back, studying with Muktananda for a whole year. Thank God it was for a year, because guess what? I got to get onto a hijacked airplane. The Japanese Red Army, who had shut up Tel Aviv airport a few years before that, killing 25 people. They threw hand grenades and machine gun people just haphazardly. Incredible insanity. Like there was a mass shooting here in America just recently at a school. I too was at a mass shooting here in America in Saugus High School. I got to de-stress people because what I learned on that hijacking. On the hijacking, I got into the deepest state of meditation I'd ever been in. How? That's inshallah, the grace of God. It's through practice. I meditated every day for 3 years, as you might say, religiously. I then got to Crenshaw High School. This is another ghetto school. And I failed a boy in government class. And I'm standing outside my government class in the hallway during passing period, where people go from one class to another. And this boy who I had failed comes walking down the hall, and he approaches me. About 5 feet away, he pulls a gun and points it at me. And I calmly, but firmly said, "Give me the gun." Clear. A lot more, let's say, energy behind it, but not fear. There was like a calm presence there. And I don't know where that came from. Had to come from inside, which is what meditation allows us to do. So he didn't know what to do. So he hands me the gun because he'd never seen anybody not have fear. That's my thought about it. I go back into my classroom after I had called the security guard and he came to take the gun and the boy away. And I go and teach my class. Other teachers who were standing nearby or down the hall saw what was happening, and they got so stressed out they had to go into the lounge rather than teach their class. So they asked me, how did you do that? And I taught them a simple thing called meditation. And I started doing that more and more and ended up teaching a program at Oxford Medical School and at the United Nations. So that is all about a little bit of inner change. But guess what? I have an identical twin brother. I know it's scary. That's why I don't look in the mirror. It's okay. I'm still alive. And he talked me into entering the International Senior Olympics because both of us had been an All-American swimmer in college. He actually was a national champion in one event. So I entered the International Senior Olympics. It was age group swimming above 25 years old. I had not trained in over 11 years. I ended up winning 4 gold medals. I entered a number of other competitions year after year, so to speak, and ended up winning 11 gold and 5 silver medals. But when I came back from that initial winning of those gold medals, some kids found out about it. And they said, well, how did you do it? And I said, well, I've been meditating and I've been eating differently than you. I knew they wouldn't change their diet. Doesn't matter. They could choose to once they get to have an effect of the meditation. One boy was a normal 208, excuse me, he was a normal runner at 202, 800 meter, 880, it's called in America, 880 yards. He went down to a 152 in 3 months. A boy who could jump 6'6", 3 months later, jumped 7'1", got a scholarship at the University of Southern California. He stopped doing his meditation after he got his scholarship. He never got better. He could have continued. Because when I was at the Olympic Scientific Congress in '88, presenting on meditation and the ultimate performance in sports, Bob Beeman, who long jumped almost 2 feet further than anybody had in history, in one jump, they usually break the records by that much. He's keynoting the sports psychology section. So I go to his talk and we talk afterwards because I said, this was my presentation. He says, that's why I got to be a sports psychologist. I wanted to know how to replicate the experience, not necessarily the performance, because your mind is in an altered state where you get inspiration, enthusiasm, energy, all that comes from within. Ended up starting something called the Institute of Sports Psychology because while I was in India, I trained the team for the Asian Games. Why? Because a swimmer who was a national elite swimmer in India told the people in the National Institute of Sports in Patiala of what effect it had on her. In the New Delhi Asian Games, she set 8 national records. So I was able to do that. And then there's an entrepreneur, a big businessman, said, we can't let you go without keeping your wisdom here, your knowledge here. So we formed an Institute of Sports Psychology. It ended up having 5 offices of the Institute around the world, Tokyo, Melbourne, and so on. Wow. I'm a simple person from a poor town in San Fernando, about 20 miles north of Los Angeles. What can't you do? There's nothing that we cannot do because I'm just another you. And when we have the intention, I'm going to jump back to 1966. So imagine I'm I'm 20 years old at the time. We had the Southern California Championships in swimming for junior colleges. I dropped from a 111 breaststroker to a 108 in one race. I was a poor breaststroker before. I was a good breaststroker after. And then I get qualified to go to the state championships with my team. And my team, Los Angeles Valley College, were looking to win the state championships against Foothill College. And we were competing against Foothill in their pool with all these other schools, with all the people who qualified from all over the state. I get into my heat, I do a 105.2, a tremendous drop from 108 in 1 week. Well, I get into a swim off with a guy from Foothill College. We both did the same exact time. His best time was a 104, so he underperformed. I did something different, but I had to go race him in a half an hour. I go into the locker rooms, a buddy massages my shoulders and so on, gets me loosened up, and I tell him my exact splits that I'm going to do. I didn't know the guy's best time was a 104, but that's what I planned to do. I thought that was good enough to get him. And I go out there on the dive alone. I was over half a body length ahead from what they say. I didn't know because I was in the zone. I was so, as they say now, they say the flow, or there's all kinds of terms for it. But this mind was just not there in a way. This body was doing what it knew what to do. I did a 103.7, getting to be an All-American swimmer because you have to be in the top 10 in America in collegiate. And there I was. I got a scholarship to Colorado, and I got to be able to become a teacher, and I got to be able to teach on 5 continents with the Institute. And we formed something for Success Systems International, and you can look that up, .net. What else is there? We can do anything. Climate change is done. We are stopping it. We've started with these after chat people. Come to the after chat. We'll be around. I can only be around till 10 because I have another opportunity to do some sharing. And what happens? We get to be able to thrive. When we thrive, we change the planet. When you join the Peace Lab, which I highly recommend, join it is just doing it. Get onto the Peace Lab on other networks. You'll see what you could choose to do, and you can do it. You can connect with me. I will send you stress management things. I will send you peak performance things. You can look on peak performance prompters on YouTube. We get to be a gift for humanity because we know, love, and serve God in every thought, word, and deed. When we get that simple idea that there is nothing that is not me, there's nothing that is not God. God is all pervasive, and we get to flow with that energy and come alive in so many ways. So I turn it over to Ian, because this man, you listen to what he's done. You think I did a little bit for being a little boy? Now I'm just an older boy, a little viejito, but go ahead, Ian, bring him into massive change.
No pressure then, Kurt.
You never had any, you meditate.
It is true. My first meditations were given to me by a beautiful arts teacher when I was 12, and I've never stopped. I've taken it to places that are really very, very, very special. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you today. I'm going to go straight into some slides. So sharing the screen and moving, of course, into a meditation. Can I just check that we have shared screen?
You're good, Ian. You look great.
Thank you. So let's take a moment Let's be with intention, the intention to take something very special from this session today, where these amazing speakers have.
Hey, Ian, you did something just clicked on your computer. Can you check it? We're seeing the. There you go. You're good now.
Good. So we have a group of people here that are looking at intention. And if we set our intention to get something special from this group, we'll actually get more from it simply by setting our intention. The skill of setting intention forms your life. The skill of intention forms everyone's life and everything in our lives. And probably the most difficult concept to get over is that it's the same skill that forms everybody's universe. We are one with the universe. And that universe, from the greatest to the smallest, has an intention. The evidence is beginning to grow stronger and stronger, but those who set their intention to know, knew, and they know now, and we're knowing even more about all of this now. One of the beauties of this slide is that it shows about an inch, 2 centimeters of the ground underneath an ancient Scottish forest. It is a remarkable example of how our universe is alive. Now, I tend to act in a very simple way. So that's a complex diagram for me. It's the relative size of one's intention which creates one's future. If you have a lot of stuff, you can only have a little intention. If you have a lot of intention, you can only have a little stuff. Now, stuff is absolutely everything that we find in our life. Our histories, our DNA, memories, our experiences, our wishes, our pleasures, our needs. It is very simple to understand that energy flows where intention goes. It is becoming the norm now to understand that there isn't very much solid matter in our universe. Energy seems to be where it all flows. And if we strike intention well, then the energy flows to us. Flow was one of the strongest words mentioned by Kurt that was around in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it is still very strongly present when and where physical achievement, which is normally attached to mental intention, cellular intention, or soulular intention, I should say. But intention is not universal. Size matters. Sometimes we are highly focused. Sometimes we are looking for confidence, knowledge, certainty, and trust. In this instance, a colleague, very, very good base jumper, decided just to show how relaxed he could be with his confidence, his knowledge of timing, his certainty of his equipment, and the trust that he has in himself. But that is the nature of true intention when it is properly focused. Now, for me, dealing with intention as part of Life College's delivery to many, many people where we really work hard to help people learn about intention and then begin to build it themselves for themselves. We have to get this essence of intention, gathering the energy and getting the focus right, whether small and highly intense or broad and highly shared. It is simply as much as it takes for as long as it takes. The next slide shows something about the ethics and values that I worked on for, I guess, 35 years now. We have been into values, living values and right living. And here is a 6-stage diagram starting from the bottom. Some of you will see that it relates very much to Maslowian type diagrams, Kohlberg diagrams, Piaget diagrams. But what it is,
You haven't switched the slide. Ian, you haven't switched the slide.
I'm just preparing everyone for a lot of words. Thank you for the warning. So if we start at the bottom, yes, the self and need and survival, and then the self, greed and want, that we could easily argue is where we find ourselves in some difficulties on our beautiful home globe now. But running quickly through human, global, cosmic, oneness, universal energy, connected, part of universal energy, and then into this wonderful place, which is where all is. We are allness, we are one, and we are universal energy. We can take from that place a wonderful further reaches of human nature, where I'm not necessarily the right answer giver here, but I'm on the route to getting some sort of right answer, which will suit some people's understandings and which will allow some development in other people's understandings. But here are 16 areas of further reaches of human nature, where if we focus on them, we get intention. We find that if we are accurate in our perception, we can get great intention. If we accept others, we can get great intention. Our spontaneity, our problem or opportunity centeredness, our detachment from other things, sense of autonomy, appreciation, our spiritual awareness, very strong one. If we can identify with humankind and nature, intention just grows exponentially. Great relationships, sense of democracy, clarity of action, humor, so creative. The energy of intention in humor is magnificent. Our ability to focus our thinking, where we are culturally independent. It is so soul destroying to see how culturally dependent so many individuals are. And of course, that great one that I think Kurt covered well and Joy covered well, we're into self-development. Our intention grows with those 16 factors. Of course, it's not as simple as that. I'll show you that each of those 16 factors subdivided, and this is subdivided by the great psychologists, philosophers, and biophilosophers of days gone by and now. One of the greatest things that we have the opportunity to do now is set our intention to stand in great balance on the shoulders of great people that have passed before. So just the first one, accurate perception of reality. It's got to be realistic. It's got to be judgment of reality, accurately judged, discrimination ability, contact between inner and outer self. This need for focusing the mind, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's forms of meditation, where it's simply being with the true self, that long, wonderful, winding inner journey, where we're unthreatened. We don't suffer from fear, and certainly not by disorder or the need for order. We can work in wonderful environments in the most amazing circumstances and not unthreatened or relatively unthreatened by the need for safety. If we don't have adventure in our world, we won't have excitement. We'll miss that huge chunk of energy and therefore that huge chunk of intention. And still able to operate despite an existing and present danger or threat. And there you'll recall that wonderful slide of that woman on the rock face. And no, it hadn't been photoshopped. She is the global leader in solo climbing, no ropes, and she's climbed the 4 greatest walls in Switzerland inside of one day, when the norm is to take several days on each north wall. Absolutely stunning. So when Life College approached the world in 1989 through the satellite, it was as a non-judgmental listening and creative source. We put out some visions of a better world, and that was picked up by United Nations and UNESCO, and we created a rather interesting book. 130 countries took part, 60 leaders of countries, thousands of organizations, and many, many, many individuals. It required a stability of stages 1 and 2, the spiritual, ethical, and universal launch pad. And without that launch pad that I've alluded to in the values and ethics and further reaches of human nature, that stability of intention is really hard to grab. Many people put it in many different words, and certainly Life College is not the arbiter of all things to do with it. But it does say we need it. 3 short examples of activities that are going on now. The first, a global one, we developed with huge collaboration and the Global Youth Council, the Choose, Change, Become program, where the young people developed a program of self-development, and they did it in New York, Peace Village, in India, Rajasthan, in Switzerland, Geneva, United Nations, UNESCO. And it came through between 2005, and it still runs in 80 countries. It's a magnificent development, and we estimate there's probably 1 million young people involved in it, working as ambassadors to anyone they can find who they are accepted as an ambassador for. It's a wonderful youth-driven program. It's further evolved into something with even greater intentionality, but it's a magnificent thing to be working with as part of the facilitation of the energy and intention of these people. If you were sharp, you'd just see that yellow dressed guy there. That was me, I guess in about 2012, something like that. The next example, this really is rubber hitting the road with intention. A national example. It wasn't difficult for me as a climber and ocean kayakist and so on from my whole life working with others to easily decipher that our society was in fear of adventure. It really had difficulty doing proper adventure. The actual risk to life, the risk to enterprise, the risk to people's potential was dramatic. We had a society that was going to go dangerously litigious if we weren't careful. So I set up Campaign for Adventure. I got some stunning support for it. It was well understood as, no, this is just not British to be afraid of being adventurous. So there you'll see in that picture on the left, there are about 6 great head teachers. There are 3 ministers from our government. There is the most fabulous educational media star that we have there, Libby Purvis. There are people from Outward Bound. And of course, there's the Rank Foundation, because an event like this has to be funded. And what's important, I set my intention, and again, you'll see me in there. I don't need to stand at the front. Set your intention, and there are plenty of front runners. So there we have New Economics Foundation, Rank Foundation, Confederation of British Industry, Outward Bound again, the World Values Foundation, and this is everyone setting their intentions in good order. The last slide is one of a local area where we did some work as Life College in Transylvania. There really weren't any sharp teeth anywhere that we looked, but what there was a wonderful group of people. Now, to bring this down to earth, I can tell you that this is the classic design of a place where there is only wood. And we worked in groups to develop the skills of creating a tourist economy in the woods. These people were starving. They only had horses and carts. They lived by burning wood, cooking on wood and forest animals, very little agriculture. You'll see in the back of the picture just here that they were still in the world of handmade hay stacks. And we worked for a week to develop their personal skills of economics, would be the short term, marketing, and developing their own offerings to potential clients coming in to see this amazing place. Well, what they decided was that they wanted to emphasize the great religious side of what happens there. And this is where they made the most ecologically stable church I've ever seen. It's pure ice. When it gets a little bit warmer, it disappears. And when it gets a bit colder, they make it again. Energy flows where intention goes. We must feed the good intentions, because that is the wolf that we want to grow. We want a real focus on that intention. And as we focus on it, our ability with it grows. So Life College, as a college of self-leadership, has all of this stuff freely available online. It doesn't need to make any more money now. And it's worthwhile saying that self-leadership through intention is where I believe the future of all our universe and everything is. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Kurt. What an astronomically awesome presentation. You guys did it, and you did it with just ease and grace, and it is so inspiring and so awesome to have you here. Thank you so much. Thank you for your decades worth of work and research and background. And for the next segment, I'd like to invite Jim Garrison to actually join us all, and let's have a conversation about what do you think, and where are we going, and what other questions? Is there anything we didn't answer that we should have answered or could have answered in this first segment? Anybody want to start? Jim, what do you think?
I'd like to say one thing that I didn't mention is that one of the other things that I got to do as a teacher in LA Unified is I was on the physical education advisory board for the whole LA Unified School District. And in doing that, I got to teach peak performance practices for academics and sports. We also set up a salary point class for that. And so that's like professional development. So people could come from K to 12 and get these kind of things, these concentration techniques, and because there's so much more. I filled a whole book up, Winning Ways for Living, that in 3 weeks got to be on the bestseller list. Now, I made a mistake. It was only a bestseller. I teach people in peak performance to be the best. That means number one. Now, if I shot for number one, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? So we get to be able to have all kinds of body, mind, spirit things in it. And what happens? You can fly with it, and you choose the ones that resonate with you, because there's so many different forms of meditation. And I put one form, which is the peacemaker meditation, in the chat, and I'm done. And Jim, you always bring some beautiful light and questions to the forefront. So go ahead, man.
Well, thank you, Kurt and Joy. What a marvelous panel that you've assembled for today. And Ian, your comments have been inspiring. You know, I think the challenge that we have is, and where I'd like to probe as we begin our discussion, is the original question. All of you have illumined how through coaching or meditation or social activism, great heights can be achieved and great things can be done. And yet, Joy, as you wrote in the kind of the introduction to the session, there's still this paradox between individual achievement and collective mediocrity, shall we call it.
Sure.
And I'd love to have a discussion and have you all comment on why is it that people can be individually so evolved, but collectively so almost infantile and primitive. You know, I noticed that even in conferences that I've convened over the years, you know, people individually are very sophisticated, but when they come into a group, they tend to almost go into an infantile status and need a lot of help and need this and that. So it just, Kurt, you raised your hand. Speak to us about how you understand this great paradox in the human psyche between individual and society.
You know, once people get out of school, they're free to be able to be pretty much what they would like to be if they can explore life. And our education system doesn't really prompt people to explore. It's all geared toward left brain, memorize this, memorize that. I got something that knows everything. I know everything now, anything I ever wanted to know and beyond. Yet, something has to be able to know how and why and when to use it. So we get to be able to, instead of sitting in our classroom like everybody's sitting in the classroom right now, they're paying attention because you don't want to pay for the lack of it, and all of that stuff that we do educationally. How is it that we can empower people? In our physical education program at Van Nuys Middle School, it got to be rated the best in the state twice. And the reason is it stressed strengthening character, which is all what Ian and I are about. And of course, Joy is too, but everybody is about it. And also fit for life and fun. Our system doesn't explore having fun and going out and being a leader. So when you get into outward bound, it opens people up to opportunities to be a leader. And when we're given an opportunity to lead, like in our Peace Lab, there were two people that were, let's say, guiders of it to a degree. We asked people to do this, or that, or the other thing. But all the people that came in and joined the Peace Lab from the after chat, we all took a lead in a particular area. And we took that and ran with it. We had incredible things done with the technology on a website and on ways to be able to find out how you are in relation to peace and so on and so forth. It was tremendous. That we did not even have a party afterwards to celebrate. And I missed that. I wanted to be able to praise everybody for all the work that they do. Just like it'd be great to have a huge party with all the people that participated in Humanity Rising and to give an incredible gathering.
I gotta stop. You get so excited and it's really thrilling, but I really would like to tap into Ian because he's a climber and he's up dealing with fear. And I think fear is a really key point of understanding what you're talking about, Jim. And I'd like to come in and talk about the technical aspects of fear. But Ian, I know that when you are out there climbing these mountains and doing some of the crazy stuff you do, and you're teaching kids to handle their fear as they're stepping out, there's something going on here. So speak to that specifically.
It's a rather broad subject, and certainly acquiring one's lack of fear is done slowly, if done sensibly. What I want to refer to here, it might answer another question for you, Jim. You might know of Professor Charles Handy. He wrote a couple of interesting books in the 80s, I guess. Empty Raincoat, and there was The Hungry Spirit. Both of them gave examples of where the paucity of the inner self was creating a fear on the outside of people, which really exists today and is being chased for inappropriate alternatives to that spiritual menu that is so rich, if we just know that we should be seeking that rather than these other things. Now, the examples that I want to give are, there are so many people who are chasing money, which has never been fulfilling. People find it nice, and it's certainly necessary in the way we've constructed our world, but it is not getting rid of our hunger, our inner hunger. Likewise, we can chase this strange thing called, I just call it territoriality. Some books were written about that too. But territory is really about the ego for me. And there are people running around trying to be the best joke maker, trying to do something better than others, trying to own something that's better than what other people have got. Just to show that we do believe in jokes around here. In Bulgaria, a place that I pushed a lot of this stuff out, it's almost like Romania, but they would never agree that they were anything like Romania. But there is a saying in the UK, you've got to keep up with the Joneses. I'm sure it's crossed the pond quite effectively, this chase for something better than your neighbor. In Bulgaria, they say, we're different in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, we don't want to get a better donkey than our neighbor. We just want their donkey to die.
God.
Yeah.
Now that is a spiral to the bottom. And unfortunately, this chase for better things is probably more honestly displayed by that joke and that culture of Bulgaria than it is by ourselves chasing a better car and stuff like that. But the answer that I've got, I say it's territoriality. You can think of anything material, but also anything personal, anything of experience. I tell better jokes than you. I know more than you. I'm dressed better than you. I'm more recent than you. I'm doing something that nobody else could do. Those are all filling an empty raincoat with nothing. What we have to do is not look in mirrors. We need to go to that place where we are not comparing ourselves. We're joining with other people without judgment, knowing that our joining is a strengthening of a spirit and an intention to make all things better, because that's a wonderful thing to do and a very, very fulfilling and happy place to be.
Yeah, beautifully put. Joy, what would be your comment?
Well, there's about 5 different ways I could talk about it. We only got 10 minutes, so I got to be really close. Okay. One of the key things is that flipping the joy switch, that triangle, that 3-pronged triangle that I had, fear, the body, mind, spirit down here, and then the joy triangle. The key is courage. And the way that you get courage is by controlling your own personal emotions. And this works. This is what's fascinating. This works whether you're talking an individual or whether we're talking a collective system. The challenge that we have is that when we're dealing emotionally, we can be very self-protected, self-aware. We can, when I'm in fear, I can go sit and take the time to go check out a society and sit down and go light my candles and do my meditation and do all my nice stuff. I'm nice and safe. But you know what? When you're in the crux of the war and you're in the middle of the battle, handling fear is a whole different story. And I'll tell you what, when you get into politics and you start fighting with law enforcement officials and people who carry guns and people who have power and people who can put you away, it's a whole different ballgame.
Totally.
So learning to manage your emotional intelligence personally is number one. But learning to manage the emotional intelligence of the people in your circle of influence is another one. Learning to manage and educate and build emotional intention and courage in networks of people is another one. Mm-hmm. And then at the tipping point, you got to know which system you're tracking, because that exponential power I was talking about in my flip charts, that exponential power moves just as fast downhill into fear as it does in positive movement towards change. And it can pick up speed when there's entire systems behind it. And I'll give you a couple of quick experiences. Imagine yourself in a full-on gymnasium. You've got a tournament going and you got guys that are just, oh my God, the energy is up. You got a team, it's only 3 points difference. You're in the last couple seconds of the game and you get a pass off to one side. Now imagine that somebody screamed with fear in that instant. What would happen? People will go crazy. They'll jump over the edges. People will start screaming because the sound of fear can permeate the atmosphere in a split second, and people get scared and they start running for the door, and you can have a herd mentality and people can die. They'll fall off the bleachers. Now, if everybody is silent or somebody starts screaming with enthusiasm, which is normal, like pandemonium, and then somebody goes, wow. I mean, oh my God, people will jump all over the thing. The person on the end of the gym will sink a 3-pointer from the foul line on the other end. And everybody goes happy and nobody falls off the bleachers. Nobody gets hurt. And the pandemonium and the enthusiasm is real for all the people in the room. And you know what? It doesn't even matter which team you're on because the enthusiasm is so high. So learning to manage that enthusiasm in the moment is what's critical. And this is why I did so much research and I got so much knowledge I can give, but people don't want to hear all that stuff unless they're in the specifics. But I contacted one of the best coaches in my region, a woman by the name of Nola Ayers. She had a 384-1 win-loss coaching record. What do you think it was in? Gymnastics. How in the heck? I mean, think about that, folks. Gymnastics is a solitary individual performance sport. It's not a basketball tournament where I got a hero that's going to sink a 3-pointer. You have to get every single person on that team working at high performance. How'd she do that? It's in my local high school, Seaham High School, Bellingham, Washington, 384-1. National coaching record in high school gymnastics. How'd she do it? I called her up and I said, Nola, I don't know what you're doing, but I need to talk to you because there's a tipping point here on this fear to joy factor. What is it? And she sat and she talked to me. She told me all the stuff that all the coaches and all these, it's like everywhere people are talking about peak performance. Fear was the point. And I said, yeah, but what's the difference? How did you get 384 times? What's up? And she says, I taught my students to spike the catecholamines. And I said, what are catecholamines? And she went back, she talked about Jim Lohr, she talked about a bunch of the people who do body chemistry work and research. And she said, at the point in gymnastics, it's the scariest sport there is because if you so much as practice, if you perform everything you do, you can kill yourself. You can be paralyzed because you're going to fall off the balance beam. You're going to fall off the rings, whatever. So managing fear is the key thing that I found is critical. When you get to go perform, you need to have your energy relaxed, pointing forward. You can't afford to be constricted and have your body shut down. And on the edge of fear, if something happens, it is the thought that goes into your head. So most of us try to teach people to manage thought. Well, you can't manage thought. Thought shows up. She says, I teach people to manage the emotional labeling and the power of the thought, because it is in the labeling of the emotion of the think that's happening that controls my catecholamines, and it will either build my norepinephrines and shut me down, or it will open the catecholamines and put me in power. And I'll tell you what, that is a key element. And I teach that in the Joy Triangle model work. But the bottom line is, whatever you put your attention on and label it with emotional intention. That's why this whole thing is about intentional bioenergetics. This whole thing is about the power of intention. Handle your emotions yourself. Keep your emotions on track and focus on what could be. What if it wasn't like that? How else could it be? What if I didn't see that right? What if there's another way out? Always check your emotional intelligence. And if you learn to manage your emotional intelligence, heart math's on the right track. All these people, it's about managing your emotions. Yeah, you know what? When I walk into a bar when I was a high school kid, or high school, I couldn't do it technically. But as a college kid, walking into the bar and you're drunk and everybody around you is drunk and these guys are going crazy, you got to learn to manage your central intelligence, your heart, manage your heart factor, manage your focus, keep it on track. I intend this, I'm going that way. Then the fear goes away, joy energy comes through, and you win. And I don't mean you win trophies. I mean, you win at life. And that's the whole point of this work that we're doing. That's what Kurt's learned how to do. That's what Ian's learning how to do, their skills. But the tipping point is at the moment that something happens, you've got 7 seconds to correct your reaction. You can either react with fear, or you can respond with courage and desire, curiosity, joy, and I'm going that way. And as a society, we follow leaders. We're trained to follow leaders. And when our leaders are off course, oh God, it's called second voicing. Okay. When you have a leader that's off course, or you have a person who brings new science to it, this actually was a study done amongst a bunch of doctors. You have a bunch of doctors in the room. They're all running with groupthink. They're all doing the same thing. And one new guy walks in with a new idea. He presents his idea. If he presents his idea and it's something that's going to challenge the status quo, and the second person who speaks says, that's not going to work, the energy in the room drops. The person's possibility of getting the project done goes right in the tank. If the second person, it's called second voicing, if the second person stands up and say, wow, that's cool. I don't know what you're saying yet, but let's talk about that. Immediately the solution goes forward. So the second voice, the power of the person who puts people into fear or shuts them down or takes them away or turns them into negative, or it's groupthink. It's really powerful. So we'll be talking some more about that in the next couple of days. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Jim. I know we're running into time, so what's next?
It's a complex question, and some of these major questions are without answer. You can just tentatively make suggestions.
It's all here.
Would be
believe me, Jim, it's not all no, it's all right here. Your heart. Yeah. Honest to God, I've gone up and down this. I'm not always, I don't have to be right, but I'm telling you, for all these people that are listening here, it's right here. Control your emotions of your heart. Put it back into, we want to live. We want to grow a living world. We want love. And I trust 98% of the people out there are good people going the right direction, wanting to do the right thing. There's only 1 or 2 bad leaders who can take us off. And when you build a system that takes us off, it's hard to rebuild it. That's why we're going to go into systems work a little bit later.
Yeah.
Heart, pull it right here.
Well, thank you, Joy. That's a beautiful note with which to end our session today. Kurt, thank you for your inspiration on meditation and the stories that you told.
Absolutely.
They were deeply profound and illuminating. So thank you for that. And Ian, Thank you for the activism that you have manifested over your professional life and the achievements that you have been part of bringing into the world and into the zeitgeist. So I just want to thank you. And Joy, thank you for convening these sessions. Thank you for your heartfulness. Thank you for your enthusiasm. And we'll take a deeper dive tomorrow, everyone, for our second of 3 programs on this very fundamental issue of intentional change. How do we do that?
And it's going to be important because fear is the #1 problem that we're dealing with when we're dealing with the doctrine of discoveries. So that's going to be it's a heavy conversation, but it's going to be, we're going to have some laughter in there. Ian's already cued, believe me, but we're going to take on the subject. And Paul McGee, he's an awesome human being with many perspectives, a lot of color. We're going to tackle it. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. You're welcome to the after chat. Stanley will put the link in the chat box, so you're welcome to join that. And we'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same station here on Humanity Rising. Bye for now.